U.S. President Donald Trump has addressed world leaders gathered for the United Nations General Assembly debate, using his speech to rail against the organization and question its purpose. Donald Trump's message was in stark contrast to that of other speakers gathered for the 80th anniversary of the UN's founding. Opening the debate, UN Secretary-General António Guterres warned of worsening conflicts around the world, calling on nations to work together to overcome threats. More than 100 speeches are scheduled over the next week under the theme Better Together. President Trump claimed that he had ended multiple wars since taking office.
And I did it in just 7 months. It's never happened before. There's never been anything like that. I'm very honored to have done it. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle.
DW's Janelle Dumaloan is in New York covering that meeting of the UN General Assembly. Janelle, I understand that President Trump is still speaking. What stood out for you in his address so far?
Yes, I think he went beyond the 15-minute time limit ages ago, Terry. But yes, this was an extraordinary speech by the President of the United States. When we were speaking to you, I said, when we were speaking earlier, Terry, rather, I said that this would be unlike the other speeches at the General Assembly. It has indeed turned out not to be. We had said beforehand that the White House had telegraphed that in this speech, he would take aim at what he calls globalist institutions who have done a lot to significantly decay the world. That is what he said, and indeed that is what he ended up doing. He said that he had done more to stop conflicts in the world than the United Nations ever did. He stopped to muse, what is the United Nations even for? He claimed that all they do is have empty words and write strongly worded letters. He once again made a pitch for winning the Nobel Peace Prize, citing again his efforts in having brought peace to countries in dispute, including Israel and Iran, Cambodia and Thailand, Armenia and Azerbaijan. Of course, his role in those disputes, they're somewhat complicated, and we cannot completely take him at his word there. And he talked about a lot of other things. He also touched on the Ukraine conflict. He also touched on the conflict in Gaza. Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry. Thank you. He also touched on the Ukraine conflict, the conflict in Gaza. He said that he was ready to impose harsh sanctions on Russia if the other NATO countries would simply stop buying oil from Russia. He also slammed his allies for supporting Palestinian statehood, saying that they should instead all get together and tell Hamas to release the terrorists. But he kept returning to this theme of how the UN was a failing organization that was doing things wrong. He also said that the UN was facilitating illegal migration. He said that the UN got everything wrong on climate change. And if there is one takeaway that the other 192 member countries that are represented in this assembly should take, it would be that, the U.S. is not perhaps the partner that it once was when it comes to dealing with global problems in a collective way. So I think this is also something that, of course, Trump has put his money behind his mouth, or rather has taken it away by cutting funding to many UN institutions. And I think what we heard from his speech today is an embodiment of how he truly feels about the United Nations.
Now, President Trump's remarks contrast sharply with the other statements we heard at the opening of the assembly, Janelle, don't they?
They certainly do. So President Trump followed three other speeches. We heard from the Secretary-General António Guterres. We also heard from the President of the General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, and the first country to speak was Brazil, so Brazilian President Lula da Silva. And they all had similar messages of working together to overcome global challenges. Now, when, for example, the President of the General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, was speaking, she said that this 80th anniversary of the United Nations was not a time for big celebrations, but also a time to find the resolve not to give up. When President Lula da Silva of Brazil was speaking, he got the loudest applause when he talked about how defending democracy is not negotiable. So these were the messages that they had, and you could really see that what they were trying to do was rally the other member countries to the UN's cause, because, you know, apart from the fact that the UN is losing its most important political and financial backer in the United States, there is this problem of effectivity and relevance in the United Nations. Many people are asking themselves, what is the United Nations able to achieve at a time where delivering, for example, on sustainable development goals has not worked perfectly? The world is still lagging in terms of climate protection, in terms of poverty, in terms of education, and that really is, and that the goals set for 2030 are not seen as achievable anymore. You do have these raging conflicts still in Sudan, Ukraine, and Gaza. And so really, I think that apart from having to convene the world together to solve the world's problems, what the UN has to do is to restore a belief among member nations that it is able to do that, that it can achieve things together.
Janelle, thank you very much. Our correspondent Janelle Dumaloan there, just outside the United Nations in New York.
Tyson Barker is with me now. He's a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Tyson, welcome back to DW. The U.S. President Trump has never really been a fan of the UN, has he? But this was all pretty harsh. What stood out to you?
Well, I would say three things. First of all, it seemed to be a kind of rally speech tailored for the UN. It had the tone of one of his speeches that he would give at a campaign rally, and focused heavily on issues that he's focused on right now, namely immigration and energy. Second is that it also had this quality of stream of consciousness, very much, taking on themes that just occurred to him at the moment, including that broken escalator, or, questions about Germany or building standards in the UN. These were things that he addressed. So it kind of meandering quality. And the third was, frankly, he was pretty critical not only of the multilateral system, but of Europe. He said that he loved Europe, but he criticized their immigration policy, criticized their energy policy. He was particularly singled out Germany in some places where he said things are going better, but criticized the policy in the past, and said that it needs to do more on toughening sanctions on Russian oil and gas in Europe in order for the U.S. to act more decisively on that front.
Much of his speech focused on domestic issues as well. Why do you think he considers the UN the right platform for this?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a strategic consideration as to whether or not he wanted to use this platform to, convey a specific message, other than the fact that, he's very good on sticking to his core themes, and those core themes remain the same whether or not he's talking domestically or internationally. Yeah. And second, there is a quality, and we've seen it in this new confident second Trump administration, that he is taking the MAGA themes global. So, his critique of previous leadership in the United States, particularly around immigration and energy, are things that he's now taking as critiques specifically to Europe, and saying that, European political leadership needs to toughen its borders and basically jettison renewable energy and climate change in order to succeed in this very tough international environment.
Where he also differs from his European allies is the matter of Palestinian statehood. He said once again up on stage there in New York that recognizing Palestine would reward Hamas. That is a minority view by now at the United Nations. Does he care?
Right. It's been a minority view for a long time, actually. What is new is that it's a minority view in the Western world. That it's increasingly becoming clear that a majority of NATO allies are going to begin to recognize Palestine as a country. But clearly, that hasn't really affected him. He spoke very clearly in similar language that would be used by the Israeli government on that this is a reward to the terrorist actions on October 7th, and that there was no real criticism on the disproportionate action taken by the Israeli government in its operations in Gaza.
He also keeps talking about having ended 7 wars, the one in Gaza, of course, not among those. He repeated it again today. What is he talking about?
Well, I think that there's a lot of room for interpretation on what constitutes a war and what constitutes ending a war. There have been in the past, 8 months, like any administration in the United States, actions that have led to tactical progress, either de-escalation of tensions between two rivals, or in a tactical skirmish on a border that was brought to bear through a moderated negotiation through the United States and other key allies. But these aren't really wars, hot wars that have ended. It's mainly these kind of tactical things, and it's more of frankly, a branding issue than actually ending specific wars. As he noted, the two true wars that everybody's focused on, the one in Gaza and the one in Ukraine, continue to rage.
And ending those were central campaign promises when he ran for re-election. That was Tyson Barker of the Atlantic Council. Thank you so much.
Thank you.